I'm ready if everyone else is ready.
I'm ready
Okay.
to. But we were having a conversation which I didn't quite grasp the detail of because I was distracted by what was happening on the screen. So
So I'm so sorry about
so
that.
Gabriel, so Gabriel had a thought about the sample, the blotchy image sample of last time. So well, let's start that conversation over again, Gabriel, and
Okay.
on the probability that I didn't really grasp what you were saying.
Okay. Got it.
And Emma
So,
wasn't here, so
okay. So last time I had this sample which involved me imagining an image of a person.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
when I told you guys about the sample, I mentioned that it was a blotchy image.
Hmm.
And then the question was I thinking of it as a blotchy image when it was occurring? And the answer to that is no. I wasn't like actively thinking about the blotchiness of the image.
Okay.
So that leads to another question. It was the blotchiness actually part of my conscious experience in that moment? Was it like part of the directly apprehensible um, experience? And I was thinking about that. I realized if the answer to that question is no, the blotchiness was not part of my experience, and that indicates two possibilities. The first one is that I'm wrong, and there was actually a clear image in my head, in my conscious experience at least. So maybe that means there was a second clear image uh, um, in my conscious experience, uh, or it means that the blotchy image just wasn't part of it at all. The other option is that there was no visual image in my conscious experience, which means that I was wrong about there being an image at all. So those are the two possibilities if I was wrong about the blotchiness being in my conscious experience, because I couldn't have had a image in my head that was both blotchy and non-blotchy.
so I'm not sure that's true. I think it is possible, maybe, to have an image that was blotchy.
Okay,
And it depends on what you mean by in my conscious experience.
right.
So if by in my conscious experience you mean I'm thematically thinking, well, look here, this image is blotchy.
Hmm.
If that's what you mean by in your conscious experience, I think the image can be blotchy, but you don't have to be thinking about it. You don't have to be centralizing the blotchiness,
Right. Okay.
but the image can nonetheless be blotchy, and you're just not paying attention to that.
Okay. So you would say that even if I'm not paying attention to the blotchiness of the image, and I am thinking of the image as an image of this particular person, the image that is in my experience can still be blotchy. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I think that's right.
Okay, good. I think I agree with that then, and I think that was the case uh, with that sample.
So let's take a similar example, but it might be easier to figure it out. Let's say
Okay.
that you have an image of the American flag
Hmm.
you are seeing at the moment of the beep the American flag.
Right.
And the seeing that you have is a black and white seeing.
Hmm.
But you're not interested particularly in the black and whiteness of it. You're interested in the flagness of it.
Right.
And so the question is, can the flag be both red and black at the same time? And I think the answer to that is yes. You can be
Hmm.
seeing a black and white flag, but understanding it as being a red, white, and blue flag.
Right. Okay.
And and the fact that you're not commenting on, look here, I'm having a black and white image, but my interest is entirely in the flag.
Hmm.
It happens as sort of a minor detail, clearly a visual detail to be black and white.
Okay.
But
Yes.
that's not thematic to you.
Okay.
The question, so I guess you would say I'm you wouldn't say I'm having a black and white image of the flag. You said I'm seeing the flag. And
Right.
one aspect of the flag is, well, this seeing happens to be black and white.
Hmm.
And yet it's not the case that I'm seeing a black and white flag.
Okay.
I'm seeing I'm seeing the American flag,
Hmm.
and the black and whiteness is not of particular import.
Okay. I would, so in the way I would think about that, I would agree. I would think about that in the following way. I would say, like, sort of semantically, it's a black and white flag. Um, that's sort of stored in a factual knowledge, but the direct perceptual experience of imagining it is a black and white flag. So there are two aspects of the experience, the semantic experience of the flag, and then the perceptual experience to the flag. I think they could coexist.
So start that portion again. Tell me what you mean by that.
Okay, so in my mind, like when I think the way I would like think of what you're saying is I would say like there would be like the semantic factual understanding of the flag, and then also the sort of imaginated or imagined simulation of the perception of the flag. So there would be the imagined facts of the flag, or the facts of the flag, the semantic knowledge of the flag would be this is a red and blue flag. The perceptual experience of the imagining would be of a black and white flag.
So I think that's probably true, but I wouldn't slice the pie that way. I don't think.
Okay, sure.
I would slice the pie as saying my experiences of the flag.
Mm-hmm.
And the black and whiteness or the red, white, and blueness is not of import to me.
Okay. Is it still part of the experience?
I think one can break that down in several different ways. We can ask, my experiences of the flag. I guess we'd have to be concrete about what the flag is. And so we're going to get some examples. So maybe we should leave this conversation and go for
Sure.
But assuming that the color of flag wasn't of particular interest to me. So let's say my uncle has just died and he's got a flag draped over his casket, and I see this picture, and whether this picture is presented in black and white or red, white, and blue, it has nothing to do, and that is immaterial to me. I am imaginarily seeing my experiences of seeing the casket with my uncle's casket with the flag on it.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you ask about the perceptual details of that, you say, well, the whole thing was in black and white. I didn't really see any color.
Okay. And are we talking about a real flag that you're actually observing, or are we talking about one that you're imagining?
Well, I think it's the same. I think it's the same thing in this situation.
Okay.
If I see a black and white photograph of my uncle's casket, or in my imagination, I see my uncle's casket.
Okay.
And the seeing happens to be in black and white, which some seeings are.
Sure. I think there is a slight difference, which is that like if you were seeing a black and white photograph, it's possible, I think, that the visual experience of the flag is not in your consciousness at all. It's just the meaning that you're reflecting on, or something like that. But if you're imagining the flag, then there has to be some visual component in your experience, presumably, because you're sort of actively bringing it into your experience. That's the point of imagining. So if you're imagining it, then there has to be some visual thing going on.
So I doubt that that's true.
Okay.
And what I think the trap that you're falling into is to believe that there's some kind of a single stream of consciousness.
Okay.
Either it's in it or it's not. And I just don't think that's true. I think experience, consciousness, or whatever is parallel processing of a whole lot of different kinds of stuff.
Okay.
And some of it's more central, some of it's less central, some of it's 50% central, some of it's 75% central, someone's 19% central. It's not,
Hmm.
it's not there or not. It's in this manner of speaking, it's there, in that manner of speaking.
Okay.
But what I would
Hmm.
say is we should not take this conversation as being closed, but we should look at individual beeps, and the individual beeps might very well make this conversation, might contribute in a salutary way to this conversation.
Okay. Sure.
And the reason that I say that is in my experience in most DES things and most life in general, the specific instances are fundamentally important.
Okay.
And
Got
it
it.
seems in sort of a philosophical analysis, as we've been going here, an analytical analysis, whatever you want to call it, that we can talk in general without looking at individual specific instances. But I don't think that's possible, really. It seems like
Okay.
it's possible, but I don't think it is.
Okay.
But I'm not trying to be dogmatic about that. I'm saying, well, let's go
Okay,
forward,
sure.
and then
Got it.
maybe we can figure out something about that.
Okay. All right. Should I begin with my first beep then?
Yes, and Amber
Yep.
will be the primary interviewer here.
Okay.
So when you're ready, what, if anything, was in your experience at the moment of beep one?
Okay. So
Oh, I'm sorry.
Um,
Really quick.
yes.
When did you wear the beeper?
So this was the beep one was at 5:23 yesterday. I didn't take the times on all the others, but they were shortly after.
But you wore them all like the evening of
Yeah,
yesterday.
it was all continuous. So it was, yes.
Okay, and then sorry, any questions other than the discussion we previously had? Any questions about this sampling or problems with the beeper at all?
No problems with the beeper. I don't think I have any questions.
Okay, perfect. And
Okay.
so go ahead with beep one.
All right. So in my experience at that moment was the words, they do have creme brulee. And also I was looking at an image of a creme brulee on my phone. So the image of the creme brulee was also in my experience. And also just the idea of there being a creme brulee in the pastry area of a Whole Foods grocery store.
I'm sorry, what was the last part about the grocery store?
Oh, the idea of a creme brulee being in the pastry area at a Whole Foods grocery store.
Okay. And of those things, is there anything that is the most salient to you?
I would say it was the image.
And that's okay. So let's start there. So what do you see?
It was just a yellow pastry, kind of looked like a little bit like a pie. And this was something that I was actively looking at on my phone. So I wasn't imagining this. This was right there. And I was looking at the creme brulee.
So do you see a creme brulee or do I see a yellow pastry that I understand?
I saw a pie-like object. At the moment, I was kind of thinking this looks a little bit like a pumpkin pie.
Is that part of your experience or is that something
that was a very slight aspect of my experience, was thinking this looks a little bit like a pumpkin pie. That it was a very, very minimal.
Okay.
Mhm.
And is the seeing, does this have any borders to it, any background?
I think I was just looking at the creme brulee, and then like everything else except for basically the top of the creme brulee was not really in my experience at all. It was basically everything else was a blur around it.
Okay. And are you seeing this creme brulee from what perspective are you seeing it? Like, are you seeing it from the top? Are you seeing it from the
Like
front?
I was
So
looking at the.
can I interrupt here? Because Amber, it seems like you're asking questions that would be more relevant if this was an inner seeing rather than an outer seeing. And the difference there is that in this situation, there is something physical or electronic or whatever that's being seen external from Gabriel.
Mhm.
Whereas in an inner seeing, then there's not something that we can say is separate from Gabriel.
Yeah.
And so the question about perspective, which direction are you looking for? Well, I'm looking at it in the real world. I'm looking at it in the way that it's presented. So what I'm recommending here is that you keep very clearly in mind the distinction between what is there to be seen on the phone and what is in Gabriel's experience.
Okay. Okay. So what should I do? Like, because I'm okay.
So what's the question? Let me see.
What is he seeing? Like the top or like the front? Because I don't know how the image looks on the phone.
Right. Yeah, that it was like like a view of it was like the top. It was like from an angle. So like you could see a little if you looked at the image, you could see a little bit of the bottom and a bit of the top, but the bottom part wasn't part of my experience. It's just the top. And
Okay.
some of the white background of the image was also in my experience as well. I forgot to mention that.
Okay. And is the phone or the fact that it's on my phone, the phone, any part of that in your experience? It's no doubt I'm
Um,
seeing it on my phone, but is that part of your experience at the moment?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Not that I can recall.
Okay. Do you have any other questions?
Yeah, I do. So I'm so on your phone. Tell me again exactly what's on the phone.
Uh, exactly what's on my phone or in the experience of my phone. So like, do you want to know what was actually there?
I want to know both, but you can
Okay.
start either way. But what I was going to ask
So
the other one too.
in okay, so in reality, it was a picture of a creme brulee on like the Whole Foods website. Below the picture was some text that labeled it and then also explained some nutrition information.
Okay.
Um, and then in my experience was just the picture of the creme brulee, the top of it, the kind of yellowish, like the differences between the browns and the yellows of like the caramelized portion, um, and a bit of the white background, and that was basically all of the visual aspects that were in my experience, or at least I was attending to.
And by the top of it, what's the it there?
The creme brulee.
So the photograph that is being displayed shows the creme brulee in its crockery or whatever you call that thing. But you weren't looking at that. You were looking at just the.
Yeah, I was just looking at the top of it, the caramelized thing.
Okay. And do you see that as far as your experience is concerned? We've been talking about it as if it was a creme brulee.
Mhm.
Do you see it as a creme brulee or do you see it as a forget what you call it.
A pie-like
I like
object.
A pie like object. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I saw it as both a creme brulee and a pie-like object.
And what does that mean that you saw it as both?
Like I knew it was a creme brulee, uh, but I knew it was a creme brulee because of the fact that it was there on the front page of the creme brulee section of the Whole Foods website or whatever. Um, but it was also like at the same time I was trying to figure out what the picture was a picture of. And I was thinking it was a pie. I was just thinking this is a pie-like object. I feel I it does feel like both of those were occurring at once.
So at the moment of the beep, I both see a creme brulee and I'm trying to figure out whether this pie-like object is a creme brulee.
Yes, I think so. I think so. Maybe, I mean, maybe, yeah, maybe what it is that part of me was wondering if it was the wrong picture, but I don't remember wondering that. I could be, and also like I could be wrong. Maybe I wasn't thinking both of those at the same time, but that is what I remember, and that's what I wrote down.
So I'm not in a position to judge what was actually in your experience.
Yeah. Mhm.
That's not my job. What my job is to, and Amber's job too, is to develop in us a way of talking about Gabriel's experience so that next time we might not be as confused about these things as we are at this time. So
Mhm.
this time I hear Gabriel to be saying, well, maybe I saw it as a creme brulee, and maybe I saw it as a pie-like object, and I was trying to figure out whether this was a creme brulee, and maybe I was trying to figure out whether I was on the wrong page or whatever.
Mhm.
And maybe all that stuff is in his experience, and maybe it's sort of a presupposition of his way of looking at the world that he's reluctant to own up to what's actually in his experience or whatever, and say, well, it could be this, yeah, for sure, it could be that, it could be this other.
I think the only maybe that there is for me is maybe I was wondering if it was the wrong image. That I feel like that's a good way of reconciling the two things that were in my experience there, but that is just a maybe. I think as I remember it, was thinking of it as a creme brulee, but I was also thinking of it as a pie-like object.
And are those the same way of thinking? Uh,
Um, no. And there was like a little bit of confusion at that moment. It was like, this is a creme brulee, but why is it a pie-like object? So there
that's
was
going
like a
that's going the other way around. Why is it a pie-like object? That's starting with creme brulee and going to pie-like. Up until now, we've been talking about pie-like and wondering whether it was creme brulee.
well, I knew it was creme brulee. I don't. If I said that, I misspoke. I knew it was creme brulee the whole time, but I was also thinking of it as a pie-like object.
Okay. And then there was a part of this conversation where you described it as being yellow and brown and against white or something like that.
Hmm. Yes, exactly.
And was that in your experience as well?
I was thinking about the brown part on top of it because that was part of like what made me think it was like a pie-like object because it reminded me of cinnamon on top of pumpkin pie.
And is that in your experience? Well, that looks like cinnamon pumpkin pie.
Uh, I wasn't reflecting on it specifically that it looked like cinnamon, but it was sort of like um, I was sort of recognizing it as a pattern of pumpkin pie that I would see on pumpkin pie. I wasn't thinking of it as cinnamon though.
So I am in some way thinking of it as visual characteristic of pumpkin pie, something that you see on pumpkin pie.
Yes. Does that answer the question?
So it seems like we've given sort of three answers to the question of what is it that you see. I see creme brulee. I see a pie-like object.
Mhm.
Notice the brownness, which reminds me of pumpkin pie.
Mhm.
And so the question is, are all three of those present to me at the moment of the beep?
I believe so, yes.
Equally?
Um,
Or doesn't that question make sense?
I think the pumpkin pie and the pie-like object part and the pumpkin pie thing, I think those two are like split because they're basically they're they're very closely related. Um, so it's like 50% is the creme brulee, 25% is the pumpkin pattern, and then 25% is the pie-like object.
So actually, we're leaving out another part of this process, which is this the wrong picture? Does the screen put up the wrong picture?
I don't, like I said, I don't actually remember that being part of my experience. I was just saying that that's like maybe some way of reconciling the two, but I don't remember that being part of my experience.
Okay.
And you had some other portions of your experience as well. Is that correct? Okay. So is there anything that was the next salient, or are they about the same at that point?
Oh, the other part of my experience was the words. They do have creme brulee.
Mhm.
I would say the image, those words. Which was the most salient here? I'm actually having trouble knowing which was the most salient.
Okay. That's okay.
Okay.
Let them work at it.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll think about that for a second. Yeah, the words were not were a limited part of my experience. It was sort of something I was saying on autopilot. They were still part of my experience, but it was a small part. It was not as big as the imagery I was just describing.
And how are those words present?
That's something I'm literally saying to somebody who is on the phone. So just auditorially.
So are you hearing these words, or I'm speaking these words in
Yeah.
your
I remember when we discussed this last time. Yeah, I was speaking them.
Okay, and out loud.
Mhm. Yes.
Okay. And is there any inflection in this statement? Like they do have creme brulee, or they do have creme brulee, or
I
something like
think
that.
I
Anything?
think it was the first one, but that's an inference um based on the conversation. So I can't actually like tell you that that was part of my experience.
That's okay. No
Okay.
problem. Um, and is there anything more to say about that portion of your experience?
No, I don't think so.
And Dr. Herbert, do you have any questions?
There's another part of his experience, I think.
Yeah, I mean
Oh,
about this
right.
portion. Do you have anything else about this portion?
Nope.
Okay.
Okay.
And then yeah, you have one more thing about this
Right.
idea of the creme brulee being in the grocery store. So, could you tell me more about that?
Yes. So this wasn't visual. This was just the idea, like, of the fact of um this creme brulee being in the pastry section of Whole Foods, like the fact that it might be there.
And when you say like the fact, the idea that it might be there, like, is this some kind of like thought process? I see it on the website, therefore it must be in the
I
pastry
wasn't
section. Is pastry section part of the experience? Is Whole Foods part of the experience?
pastry section. It is like what I said was essentially all part of the experience. It was the fact of it being in the pastry section. It wasn't the fact of it being in Whole Foods. It was the fact of it being in the pastry section. But and that didn't represent itself in any particular way aside from just like acknowledgement of a fact in my head. And it didn't the way it came about wasn't part of my experience either. It was just there.
Now, when you say acknowledgement,
Mhm.
how what how is this present to you? You said that it's just there. What do you mean by that?
That's really hard for me to answer because
Okay.
it's basically like um it's basically just floating somewhere in my head. It's just a fact that's in my experience. And it's not anywhere specific. It's not like visual or sensory. It's just a fact. So I don't know how to describe it really because it's just a fact.
Okay. So I guess the question, I'll try and ask the question a different way. So,
Okay.
what I'm wondering is this something like I had like all of this is happening at the moment of the beep, right? So I'm seeing this image, I am saying they do have creme brulee, and I am understanding that this would be in a pastry section,
Hmm.
or is this something different, something else like a like an I like is this more of like a cognitive process? Like because I'm seeing it, I'm saying it, I'm understanding what's going on. I understand it to be that it'd be in the pastry section, or is this fact somehow present in a different way? I don't know if that question made sense.
I think it's present cognitively. Like I feel like that's the best way of putting it.
Okay.
So let me comment on the process here.
Yeah.
Well, part of what's making this conversation a little bit complicated is that fact is being used in two different ways.
Yeah.
It is a fact or it's not that Whole Foods has creme brulee on its pastry, whatever. And that fact is independent of Gabriel or Amber or me or anybody else. But I don't think that's but I don't think that's part of what's in Gabriel's experience. The question is whether Gabriel has, as part of his experience, this whatever it is,
Right.
thought about the creme brulee being on the pastry.
Maybe I should have said it's the idea of creme brulee being in the pastry section.
So even idea is a little bit state of the universe rather than Gabriel's experience. The question is whether at the moment of this beep, the fact that or the idea of that is present to Gabriel. That yeah, creme brulee is on the pastry. There is creme brulee on the pastry.
Is that a question to me?
Well, we're thinking about how to do this. So there's lots of facts or ideas out there
Mhm.
that are true. Trump was indicted or referred or whatever. That's true. There's a war between Russia and whoever, and that's true. And you could call that a fact, or you could call that an idea. But there's the idea that this war is going on. All that stuff is happening.
Okay.
But that doesn't mean that at any particular moment, Gabriel, at this particular moment, the moment of this particular beep, that was in your experience. It was no less a fact and no less an idea, but one of those was maybe in your experience, and the rest of them
right. It was this fact of the pastry thing that was in my experience.
Okay.
Oh, and actually, I should say also, it wasn't. It was more of a. It was the fact that it's possible, not the fact that it is, but the fact that it's possible.
So somehow present to me in my direct experience at the moment of this beep and no other beep, or we're not talking about any other beep, we're talking about this one. It's possible that creme brulee is in the pastry aisle.
Yes.
And that's not spoken. There's no words involved here.
No.
Even the word creme brulee.
No, that was not. I mean, creme brulee was in my experience because I was saying it, but that wasn't part of this thing.
Okay.
That wasn't part of this part of my experience.
Okay.
So I suppose this was one of those unsymbolized facts or thoughts.
Sounds like it, but I'm reluctant to use that word until we figured out what the characteristics are.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't want the word to be out ahead of the experience. I'd rather have the word sort of lag behind the experience.
Okay, got it.
And how prominent is this particular,
the fact?
This experience of creme brulee on the pastry aisle? Is that 1%, 10%, 50% of your
I'd say it's like it's like 5% or maybe something around there. It's not a very big percentage, but it was there, and it was there, and it was okay. It was kind of small, but it was there. It was small, but it was still like significant in a way, in the sense that it did make me kind of pleased. It was a pleasing fact.
And is that part of your experience at the moment of the beep, the pleasing part?
Yes. Yeah, that was part of my experience. And I did have that written. I have that written down right here. Slightly pleased.
So what I've got something like ongoing in my experience, caught in flight by the moment of the beep, by the leading edge of this beep, is I see something which I take to be creme brulee. I see something that has a pie-shaped thing. I see some brown stuff that reminds me of pumpkin pie. I say aloud, they do have creme brulee. And I have an idea, thought, experience somehow of what might be on the pastry aisle.
Yes.
And all those things are ongoing. That's 5 pretty separate things.
Yeah, those are 5 pretty separate things, and slightly pleased as well.
And slightly about that.
So yeah, all those things, as I remember them, were in my experience at the moment of the beep. Now, or at least whatever my temporal resolution is of assessing my own experience.
I'm good about that one.
Okay.
Shall I ask about number 2?
Sure.
Number 2.
Okay. So in number 2, the word cysteine, the idea of Italian brothers. Oh, I should give an explanation for what I was doing. I was looking at a a cartoon that my mom had sent me, and it was about some Italian brothers who had built the floors of the Sistine Chapel, and it said something like, unfortunately, they were not remembered as well as the guy who made the ceilings, but the Lombardo brothers built the floors. So the word Sistine was in my conscious experience because I had just read it. It was the idea of Italian brothers, and there was a slight discomfort over realizing that the joke was not very good or very logical, since they would have credit. So it's not like surprising. Like there's probably some record somewhere of the people who built the floors of the Sistine Chapel. So there's that slight discomfort. And then there was also the word pristine, floating in the back of my head, or not auditorially, but I just read the word Sistine, and I was thinking of it. Part of me was thinking of the word Sistine as the word pristine. So that was what was in my experience.
So you sort of broke up a little bit. So there's one word is Sistine, as in the chapel.
Mm-hmm.
And then there is another word that I couldn't tell whether you were saying Sistine again or Sistine.
Pristine.
Pristine.
Mm-hmm.
So two separate words present at the moment of the beat. One is Sistine, like the chapel, and one is pristine, like pristine experience, whatever.
Right. And Sistine was auditory, but pristine was not.
And by auditory, what do you mean?
I mean, it was inner speaking, or inner reading, just like the last time we talked about the first time we talked about the inner speaking, and I talked about that sort of whispery, kind of non-human voice. That's what the voice was. So it was the auditory experience of the word Sistine.
So this is more about the hearing of this whispery voice.
Mm-hmm.
Not so much.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Not so much about the speaking of it. Is that right? Or is it speaking in this whispery voice? Is it more about speaking?
It is inner speaking. So it was the experience of the word Sistine was speaking, and inner speaking that I'm also hearing.
Okay. And pristine is a different thing.
Pristine is not auditory. Pristine is just an idea. It's like the idea of pristine, because I was, for a second, my brain was like wondering if Sistine meant pristine. It hadn't, like, at that moment of the beep, it hadn't 100% chosen how to interpret Sistine. So the possibility of the chapel and the possibility of pristine were in my head.
And when you say your brain was trying to decide that, is this something that you experienced?
I experienced it as the word pristine being in my head, but I wasn't like actively noticing or trying to determine how to interpret the word Sistine.
And how is the word pristine present to you?
It's present to me just as the meaning of the word, and I don't know if there was any visual associated with that. It's possible there was, but I don't know for sure.
But when you say as present to me as the meaning of the word, do you mean just the meaning of it, or do you mean the word as a semantic unit? I semantically understand this word. The word's there, and I understand what it means.
I mean, it's just the meaning of the word pristine was floating in my head, sort of semi-attached to cysteine, which I had just read. It was like, yeah.
So the word pristine is not present to you.
Not the auditory experience of the word, just the meaning of the word.
And by just the meaning of the word, do you mean just the meaning of the word without the word itself, whether spoken, heard, seen, whatever?
I think yes, without the word itself.
Okay. So the meaning of the word pristine is present,
Mm-hmm.
and the spoken and heard version of the word cysteine is present.
Yes.
And those are somehow experientially connected, or are you inferring that those are connected because of this thought process?
Which two things?
Pristine and cysteine.
I'm inferring that they're connected. The connection between the two wasn't in my experience.
Okay.
So glad I got that out of the way.
Okay. So our task is just to describe what's in experience.
Yes. Okay.
So they may very well be connected by some thought process,
Mm-hmm.
but that goes beyond our task here.
Yes. Okay.
So as far as your experience is concerned, it seems so far, see if I got this right, that the word cysteine is present as if spoken in a whispery kind of a voice.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea or the meaning of pristine is present, but not spoken, and even the word itself is not actually present. But those two things are in my experience, and I don't experience them as being in some way connected.
I do not.
Okay. And then
I have a question about that really quickly.
before,
So you were saying that it's floating in the back of your head. Is that do you mean that metaphorically, or
I mean that metaphorically.
Okay. Just wanted to double check.
Okay.
And I'm good.
and then there's some idea of Italian brothers, and that the joke wasn't very good.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Is that two separate things?
Yeah, those are two separate things. There's the idea of Italian brothers. Yes, and the idea that the slight discomfort over the joke not being very good.
So which one of those should we talk about first? Doesn't matter to me.
Who's that question for?
Here for you.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it doesn't matter to me. I could talk about either of them first.
Oh, let's talk about the brothers then.
Okay.
So somehow there's an idea of Italian brothers present to me. What do you mean?
So the idea of Italian brothers, in this particular instance, it was sort of the idea of somehow overweight Italian brothers, because in the cartoon there's like a picture of like some kind of overweight guys, but it wasn't. There was no visual image. What caused the idea of overweight Italian brothers was the overweight people in the cartoon. So that's what it was. It was there was yes, yeah, and this is kind of strange, but there was like some slight old fact like smell of sweat as that it was associated with the idea, and that was partially in my experience.
Okay, so by brothers, do you mean people with the same parents, or by brothers do you mean like a religious sect kind of a deal?
Oh, I mean people with the same parents.
Okay. And and by brothers, do you mean sort of an abstract thing? Like I've got a brother, you got a brother, the whole world's got brothers, whatever. Or do you mean these particular two guys?
It was actually, it was either 3 or 4.
Three or four guys, whatever.
Yes.
But you don't mean brothers in the general. You mean the Lombardo brothers or
Yes.
Okay. And so when we say the idea of the overweight Italian brothers, does that mean I'm somehow thinking of the Lombardo brothers and I'm thinking of them as being overweight and at the same time I smell sweat?
It was more like the smell of sweat combined with the idea of like overweightness was itself a part of the idea of the Italian brothers. So the Italian brothers was like a part was made up of those two things and the concept of brothers and Italian.
So I could understand that in a variety of different kinds of ways. In my experience, it could be I'm smelling sweat and thinking about overweightness or something. And then when I have to tell these guys about it, I say, well, that's somehow that means the Lombardo brothers.
Yes.
Or I could be thinking about the Lombardo brothers. The Lombardo brothers are sort of central to my experience. And when I tell these guys about it, I can say, well, there's a smell of sweat involved and overweightness. That's
right.
Or
the sweat and overweightness was itself like part of the identity of the idea of the brothers. It wasn't something that the brothers' idea was causing. It was itself central to the idea of the Lombardo brothers.
And is the smell? Do I actually smell it?
Yeah, there is a slight smell.
Okay, so it's not just the idea. These brothers are smelly. It's I smell them. And so I smell something, which I understand to be the brothers. And I'm thinking about the brothers, thinking about the Lombardo brothers. And I somehow know them to be overweight. And all that stuff seems like one package. I'm thinking about the overweight, smelly. I'm thinking about and smelling the overweight Lombardo brother.
Yeah, none of it is incidental. It's all wrapped up together into like one thing, which is the Lombardo brothers,
who smell like this and who are, and that's part of the essential deal of it. Okay. Okay. And then there's the joke.
Yes. Sorry, what was that?
Unless Amber had additional questions about the Lombardos.
I just wanted to be clear that this idea of the brothers, is this an idea of broadly Italian brothers or specifically the Lombardo brothers? Because we had kind of said both things in the description.
Oh, okay.
Does that question make sense? What I'm saying? So are all these ideas somehow in my experience, the Lombardo brothers are in my experience, or is my experience this maybe a little more I don't want to say that. Is my experience about the Lombardo brothers, or is my experience about Italian brothers?
It's okay. Yes.
Like,
The name Lombardo Brothers was not in my experience.
mhm.
That was something that I had passed over. It was about specific brothers who had done the floors of the Sistine Chapel, but the name was not there.
Okay.
In that moment, if you asked me what their name was, I wouldn't even remember.
Okay, but it's
Mm.
about the brothers who built the floor of the
Yes.
system. Is even the idea of Italian brothers?
Yes, Italian was there.
Okay.
And is floor builders there as well?
Uh, that is there, but that is there in the in the part of being disappointed with the joke. That is not there being part of the brothers.
So in this thought is about a particular band of brothers, particular group of actually genetically related people
Mhm.
who smell this way and are overweight.
And happens to be
Yes,
Italian.
yes, and okay. There was also and have a company together, a family company.
Okay. Okay. And then there's the discomfort with the joke.
Yes. So, um, there was there was discomfort with the joke because it wasn't as good as I thought it would be. Now because let me think about whether or not because it was good, not as good was in my experience, or if it was just the discomfort and that was caused by that. Okay. Uh, there was discomfort and there was this joke is not very good, but the not as good as I thought it could be wasn't part of it. That was a cause of the feeling that it wasn't very good because I had higher expectations of the joke. But that wasn't in my experience. It was just this joke is not very good and discomfort or displeasure.
And this joke is not very good. How is that present to you?
That is present to me. That is present to me in the knowledge that the joke isn't actually pointing out a truth, which is, the idea of the joke was sort of like, oh, nobody thinks about the people who built the floor of the Sistine Chapel. I when I got to that word Sistine, I realized, okay, I bet you there probably is documentation as to who built that floor. So it's not so to me the joke, because of the fact that there actually is documentation, the joke wasn't as good. So this joke isn't very good is present in the recognition that there is documentation.
And so is the realization that there's probably documentation, is that part of the context of this, or is that part of the actual experience? Well,
that is part of the actual experience.
So the actual experience is that this joke rests on faulty principle, basically.
Yes.
And should I call that sort of an analytical thing or cognitive?
It was analytical. It was analytical. There was an actual feeling of disappointment as well. And the feeling of disappointment in my experience was sort of one and the same with the analysis.
So I experience myself as having engaged or currently engaging in an analysis project and also feeling a slight discomfort.
Yes, that's what was going on.
Okay. And does the analysis seem like it's still going on, or is the analysis over and now I just have the result of it?
Oh, the analysis is over. I just have the result of it.
And the result of it is the joke's not very good.
Yes.
And I know what not very good means because I went through the analytical process. It means that the truth values don't add up or whatever.
Yes.
Okay. And then at the same time, I feel discomfort.
Mm-hmm.
And what does that mean?
The discomfort is basically one and the same with the end result of the analysis. Like it is technically a different thing logically, but it's in my experience, it's basically the same thing. And I can't describe the discomfort. It's just discomfort. It's not like physical or anything like that. It's just discomfort.
And if it's the same thing as this isn't a very good joke, why don't we just leave it as it isn't a very good joke? And I'm not trying to say we should or shouldn't do that. And I don't really care about the words involved. What I want to know is it seems like you've been saying pretty convincingly that there's sort of two aspects of this. One is the analytical, it's not a very good joke, and the other is discomfort, as if
Right.
two separable, related obviously things, but
Yes.
and I
It's
would
like, okay, let me think about it because that's a hard question. I almost want to say that I recognize the discomfort or displeasure is a result of the analysis, and I realized it in that moment. But I don't think that's accurate. It's more like the analysis was like the result of the analysis that this wasn't a very good joke. Like that fact, this isn't a very good joke. It's like that was made of displeasure in a sense. They're really kind of one and the same. Yeah, they really do feel like one and the same. It's like the fact is the displeasure.
so the fact that these truths don't add up and displeasure are the same thing.
Yeah. That's how I experience it, at least.
That's what we're shooting for.
Okay.
So we're 10 minutes past where we're supposed to be here, and we got another meeting coming up pretty soon. So we're gonna have to bring this one to a close.
Okay.
But I would say I think these are totally interesting. I hope we can do some more of them. We have to figure out when we're going to do it.
All right. I'd be happy to do more.